efficient SKYACTIV technology and the latest connectivity and infotainment features, the third generation Mazda 2 Super Mini is smarter and sharper than ever before. It packs some big car features into a pertly style body, features some classy 1.5 litre petrol and diesel engines that make great real-world economy, and brings buyers one of the most interesting interior designs in the segment. If you were thinking of buying an ordinary small hatch of this sort, it might be time to consider a more extraordinary one. Mazda likes to think of itself as a car maker that defies convention. That's something relatively easy to do with a niche sports car like their MX-5, or maybe even with a small crossover like their CX-3. Achieving that objective with a volume Super Mini, though, is a much harder thing. Yet that's exactly what this third generation Mazda 2 sets out to do. This car, we're told, really does offer something distinctly different from its Corsa class rivals in terms of design, engineering and high-tech equipment, all areas we're going to explore in detail here. I'm going to start though by talking of something far more fundamental, the way that this is very much Mazda's own car. I should explain that its two predecessors weren't, both Fiesta-based and both created at a time when the Hiroshima brand depended very much on Ford underpinnings for the design of its family models. In some ways that was good. The old second generation version of this model we first saw back in 2007 was sharp and enjoyable to drive, just like a Fiesta. What it lacked was the polish and class common to the really premium offerings in this segment, cars like Volkswagen's Polo, maybe even Audi's A1. Ideally, what was needed going forward was for that old vitality to be matched with more upmarket quality. Freed from the shackles of Ford influence, the design team behind this Mark III model aimed to deliver just that. It's a difficult thing to do. Premium quality usually means extra weight, which is why before this car arrived in the spring of 2015, Super Mini buyers could either have something that felt upmarket, like a Polo, or something that felt fun and sporty, like a Fiesta. Conventionally, you can't combine these two virtues, but a brand prepared to defy convention might shatter this status quo. That's why this Mazda 2 is so much lighter than most of its competitors. It's why its SKYACTIV engineering doesn't follow its rivals' obsession with downsized turbocharged engines. It's why its approach to space efficiency is almost unique. And it's why it introduces dynamic and safety-orientated technology to this segment that previously was restricted to much larger cars. Sounds promising, doesn't it? Time to put this car to the test. There are probably going to be a couple of ways people react to the road-going experience served up by this car. Those familiar with the previous second-generation Mazda 2 model will probably find this Mark III version to be a little more mature and comfort-orientated in comparison. Come to this Super Mini with experience limited to something else in this segment though, and you'll probably feel it to be quite sporty. The Mazda 2 always has been. Now, I mention this difference in perspective to highlight the way the brand has sought to evolve this Super Mini in Mark III guise. The Fiesta underpinnings its predecessors had to use historically both helped and hindered this model line's progress in the small car sector. On one hand, that chassis imbued the 2 with a reputation for agile sportiness. But on the other, it could do little to help it achieve the kind of big car feel needed for progress at the premium end of this segment. It all meant that when at last Mazda was able to design its own Super Mini completely from scratch and create its own chassis for this third generation version, a difficult balance of virtues was needed. The brand couldn't alienate customers who loved the previous model's verve and joie de vivre, but it couldn't grow its market share without Polo people, customers prioritising comfort and a small car that could occasionally also undertake longer trips too. To satisfy these folk with extra quality though would normally also mean extra weight, with a consequent impact on running cost efficiency. It all caused quite a bit of head scratching in Hiroshima, One reason perhaps why it took the brand so long to develop this car. Still, what we've ended up with seems to have been worth waiting for. Developed primarily through extensive use of what the Japanese maker calls its SKYACTIV technology. SKYACTIV is one of Mazda's favourite buzzwords, an all-encompassing term for an efficient approach to vehicle engineering. This aims to drive down running costs by saving weight and ramp up driving enjoyment by doing exactly the same thing. It's a solution that seems so obvious, and indeed one that every other rival brand strives to achieve, before getting bogged down in having to make its products bigger, better equipped, safer and better built. But then no other brand has invested itself into the process quite like Mazda. Integral to this Mazda 2's design philosophy is its SKYACTIV chassis, its SKYACTIV body, its SKYACTIV drive transmissions and its two SKYACTIV engines, all of them with bulk trimmed to the minimum, bringing the collective result that this car is significantly lighter than most of its rivals. As a result, it'll accelerate more quickly, stop more sharply, corner more keenly, the suspension will be able to do its job more effectively, and you won't be exacting such a huge demand on brakes, transmission and tyres. Hardly a marginal improvement then, but instead one you can really feel. Hustle through the bends, for example, and you'll notice how sharp the corner turn-in is. Though it's rather disappointing to then find that when you take the car up on its invitation and try and throw it around a little, there's nothing like the feedback through the electric power steering that this car's predecessor used to give. Still, the compensatory gains this time round are many. Ride quality is excellent, and thanks to an uncommonly stiff chassis, 22% more rigid than before, this Mazda remains exceptionally nimble and agile for a model of its size. It's nippy round town too, an environment where you appreciate the ease with which you can park this car and its tight 4.7 metre turning circle. On to those SKYACTIV-G petrol and SKYACTIV-D diesel engines then, all of them 1.5 litres in size. On these shores, the vast majority of buyers will choose the petrol option, which is deliberately old school in its configuration, offering 4 cylinders and normal aspiration in an age where most rivals are switching to downsized 3-cylinder turbo units. But don't mistake old school for being old hat. These SKYACTIV-G engines, the G stands for gasoline, are anything but, and some of the engineering is very impressive, primarily when it comes to the 14:1 compression ratio, one of the highest ever recorded for a mass-produced petrol-powered passenger vehicle. That gives you greater pulling power at low speeds and better engine efficiency. I'm putting the technology to the test with the pokiest petrol version here, a 115 PS unit that's able to deliver more performance than almost anything you'll get in this class that doesn't claim to be some kind of junior hot hatch. If you're quick with the slightly notchy but satisfying Mazda MX-5 sports car style 6-speed manual gearbox, you'll find 62 miles an hour to be 8.7 seconds away from rest en route to 124 miles an hour. Most customers, though, will choose this SKYACTIV-G unit in its more efficient 90 PS state of tune. Here you get the choice of a 5-speed stick shift or a 6-speed automatic. Swap the cogs yourself and you'll find this car still satisfyingly perky, making the 62 mile an hour benchmark in 9.4 seconds on the way to 114 miles an hour. To give you some perspective, that's a couple of seconds quicker than most comparably powerful Super Mini rivals can manage. Choose this variant at all costs over the slower and less efficient entry-level 75 PS model, which is really only there as a price leader and takes nearly 3 seconds longer to manage the 62 mile an hour sprint. On to the diesel option, a pokey 105 PS SKYACTIV-D unit with a decent 220 Newton meters of torque on tap, certainly more than you'd expect from a car of this size. More importantly, we've a car here that to all intents and purposes is able to offer the performance of a really potent black pump fueled Super Mini at the same time as delivering the economy you'd usually expect from a really eco-conscious diesel. So you get rest to 62 miles an hour in 10.1 seconds en route to 111 miles an hour, but 83 miles to the gallon combined cycle fuel economy and a sub 90 gram CO2 figure. Have cake, eat it. It's as simple as that. I'll finish though back where I started, with that development need to make this car feel that bit more grown up, that bit more solid, safe and premium. You wouldn't have thought that making it lighter was a good way to go about that. After all, light means tinny, and tinny equals cheap and noisy, doesn't it? Not here apparently. That stiff chassis plays its part in refinement, along with enhanced floor panel beads that reduce cabin noise by as much as 5 decibels, for example, and a lot else I won't bore you with. Bottom line is that noise has been ruthlessly engineered out of this car at source, and as a result, almost nothing creaks, nothing squeaks, nothing feels cheap. True, the engines can be a bit vocal if you rev them, but the extra torque that comes with the SKYACTIV technology helps to minimise the need for that. Combine all this with a decent driving position and truly excellent seats, and you've a small car that's more adept than most at undertaking longer trips. Mission accomplished. In designing this car, Mazda's development team contemplated what the competition was doing and then did something completely different. Most modern super minis, they noticed, were being designed to look bigger and roomier than they actually were through the simple trick of moving these front A-pillars forward. It's a quick way to make the cabin look bigger, but an illusion that'll disappoint once you take a seat inside if the car in question sits on underpinnings that are very little different from those of its predecessor. The third generation Mazda 2, its development team decided, wouldn't be like that. What if those A-pillars could be moved 80mm backwards, yet at the same time the car itself could be made 140mm longer with 80mm of extra wheelbase? Wouldn't the resulting shape look sporty and compact, yet disguise as much practicality as a car in this class might ever need? It was a great concept, and it's been completed with a rather artful interpretation of the Kodo soul of motion design theme that inspired the Hazumi concept version of this car, and which for some time now Mazda's been rolling out across its model range. This is perhaps most evident here at the front, where this prominent three-dimensional grille is linked to Predator-style headlights by these chromed wings that pass through the lamps, on this top version lit by jewel-like LEDs, on a contour that continues down the side of the body. Follow this swage line in profile and you'll see it joined by 2 others. An upper crease that ends at the horizontal rear combination tail lights, and this lower crease there to give a bit of shape to the flanks. Perhaps most notable though is the length of the bonnet. Whereas many other super minis are gradually morphing into a blobby one-box shape for the reasons I explained earlier, this Mazda 2 goes the other way with a distinctive cab rearwards design that gives this Mark III model a more purposeful, more muscular look than its predecessor ever had. Move around to the rear and the clean, sculpted look continues, finished by this neat roof spoiler and embellished by the distinctive U-shaped lighting signature. But of course, as usual, it's what lies beneath all the stylised panel work that's really important. In this case, a SKYACTIV body that's lighter yet stronger and far more rigid than before, and a SKYACTIV chassis that's designed to try and replicate the kind of connected feeling you get in Mazda's little MX-5 sports cars, something the brand likes to call Jinba Atai. This translated from the Japanese to mean a feeling of horse and rider becoming one. That's what's driven development of this car's completely redesigned steering, braking and suspension systems. And as it happens, the same concepts also inspired much of the thinking that's created an equally characterful at-the-wheel experience. The wide opening doors make it easy to get to, and once inside, the cabin's more spacious than the exterior styling leads you to expect it might be, divided into 2 zones, one focused on driving, the other on connectivity and infotainment. But I was talking about that feeling of connectedness. This driving position certainly delivers that, though it takes a moment or two to realise why. It might be down to the optimally placed pedals, freed up for perfect positioning, thanks to the way that the front wheels of this third generation design have been moved 80mm forward. And the ideal sighting of the chunky 3-spoke steering wheel also helps. For me though, it's the seats that are most important here. Height adjustable of course, and redesigned in this Mark III model to provide 30% more body contact and much more support to your upper and lower back. They also offer a lot more front and rearward movement than before, as does that reach and rake adjustable wheel. In short, getting comfortable in this Mazda is as easy as you could ever imagine it would be in a car of this diminutive size. Once you've completed that process and taken a look around, there are a few things that'll stand out. First up is this deeply cowled motorcycle-style central dial, provided as a rev counter in this sporty version, with a digital speed readout that's also replicated on the optional head-up display that projects key driving information onto the bottom of the windscreen. Now, the whole instrument layout is all so neat and uncluttered that you initially wonder what might be missing, before realising that actually nothing really is. The other defining interior feature lies not in what's included, but in what's missing. There's no centre stack dividing the front of the cabin, so no mid-mounted display screen or stereo system where you'd expect to find it here in the middle of the dash. That infotainment display, where provided above base trim level, has been resighted onto the very top of the fascia, where it's placed more precisely into your field of vision. Other brands are starting to offer displays of this sort in cars of this class, but they all rely primarily on fiddly touchscreen functionality. This MZD Connect setup can work like that too, and also features voice control. In practice though, you won't want to be jabbing away at it or trying to figure out the linguaphonic wizardry, as it's much easier to simply operate the thing with the silver rotary multimedia commander controller that you'll find just behind the gear stick. As with so much in this Mazda, it's the sort of feature you'd expect to find in a larger, pricier car. The 7-inch colour screen itself, which initially seems a little half-finished, given that not all the home screen icons fit within the confines of the display, actually turns out to work really well, marshalling the usual stereo, media and informational functions with slick clarity. Plus, of course, it simply loves to work with your smartphone, be that of Android or Apple in genre. You simply link into a variety of free mobile content available through AHA, a cloud platform-based service that can do everything from connecting you through to tens of thousands of global radio stations to linking you into social media. Mazda even claims you can have Facebook posts read to you through the speakers and post your own via the voice command system, which all sounds very distracting to me. There are other upmarket style touches too, like these 3 Audi A1 style circular vents, the offside 2 connected by a 4th horizontal one for extra styling symmetry. You really have to stretch to the plusher trim levels to get the full effects of all this though, and even there you don't get quite the depth of materials quality that you would in an A1. The Hiroshima brand, it seems, still has a little to learn from the plusher Volkswagen Group brands in terms of soft touch plastics and general cabin embellishment. That said, we're talking here of a huge step forward from the second generation Mazda 2 model, complemented by what seems like solid build quality from the Thai factory. That leaves only a few practicalities: a big glove box, deep door pockets shaped to hold large 1-litre bottles, and a useful smartphone-sized tray next to the 12-volt socket. Then there's the question of all-round visibility, which is very good once you get used to the slight restrictions in your over-the-shoulder perspective. Otherwise, the car's very easy to place. The long bonnet making parking easy, and the slimmer repositioned A-pillars improving your front three-quarter view at roundabouts and junctions. And there's the greater feeling of spaciousness that I mentioned earlier, courtesy of a bit of extra roof height. This car's 20mm taller than its predecessor, and the fact that the seats have been placed further apart. Parents will find that makes turning around to their rear-seated offspring that little bit easier. Talking of a seat in the rear, let's try that out. Since this third generation model is no wider than its predecessor, it'll be just as squashed in here as ever it was before if you try and cram in 3 full-sized adults on longer trips. But then that's the case with virtually every Super Mini of this sort. What's arguably more important is that thanks to that extra wheelbase length, there's more legroom than before, with slimmer front seat backs featuring concave sculpting, also providing 19mm more room for your knees. Out back, that extra body length has released a little extra boot space. The trunk capacity up 30 litres to a 280 litre total. That's about the same as you get from most rivals, though a little down on boxier contenders like Skoda's Fabia and Hyundai's i20. Still, the capacity increase combines with the wider lower set luggage lip and a useful 1000mm gap between the wheel arches to ensure that Mazda 2 owners can now more easily cram in awkwardly shaped things like baby buggies. If you need more space, you can, as usual, push forward the rear bench, though for a 60-40 split like I've got here, you need to avoid entry-level trim. With the backrest flattened, you end up with a bit of an awkward step in the boot floor. But if you can negotiate that, then up to 960 litres of fresh air is available. Mazda 2 pricing sits in the £12,000 to £17,500 bracket, based around a single 5-door body style. Over 90% of buyers will choose one of the three 1.5 litre SKYACTIV-G petrol models, and they probably won't spend very long selecting between them. The entry-level 75 PS unit's rather feeble, while the pokiest 115 PS engine I'm trying here is quite expensive, as it only comes in top-spec trim. That leaves the 90 PS 1.5 litre petrol derivative as the compromise choice. It's worth its extra model-for-model premium of £1,000 over the base unit, and is the only power plant in the range that gives you the option of automatic transmission for an extra £1,200. Those few Mazda 2 buyers wanting the SKYACTIV-D diesel version must find a £2,000 premium over the equivalent 1.5 litre 90 PS petrol model, which means that to fuel from the black pump in this car, you'll need to be budgeting from around £16,000. On to the value proposition all of that represents. How does this Mazda 2 work in the whole scheme of things when it comes to mainstream Super Mini pricing? Pretty well, actually. In terms of quality and technology, it's the kind of car you'd pay a bit more for in this segment. Certainly in its development, Mazda's target wasn't to take on the bargain brands, and the result is that to own one of these, you'd probably have to find a model-for-model premium of between £1,000 and £1,500 over the sort of sum that you'd pay for something quite cheap in this sector, like a Kia Rio or a Hyundai i20. What Mazda hasn't done here, though, is try to overreach itself and make this car as pricey as, say, a Volkswagen Polo or a Honda Jazz. It sells for the kind of money that can match and sometimes undercut mainstream bestsellers like Corsas and Fiestas. Can I be specific? Well, let's take the volume 1.5 90 PS petrol Mazda 2 as an example. The engine in this car is virtually as efficient as the high-tech 1-litre turbo units you get in a Corsa or a Fiesta, yet offers significantly more performance and lists at a price that will save you £700 to £800 over those two models. It also undercuts other direct rivals that claim to emphasise modern efficiency, cars like Peugeot's 208 1.2 PureTech E VTI 82 and Renault's Clio 1.2 TCE, while even more severely humbling them against the stopwatch. In fact, it's hard to think of a directly comparable alternative in this segment that can match the performance of this 90 PS petrol-powered Mazda 2. Maybe Skoda's comparably priced Fabia 1.2 TSI? But then that car needs 110 PS to do it, which is why it'll cost you a little more to run. It's sobering to think that a Volkswagen Polo fitted with that same 1.2 litre TSI engine would cost you around £17,000. If you're one of the relatively few potential buyers looking at a Mazda 2 SKYACTIV-D diesel, you might decide that the facts in its favour are equally compelling. The bad news is that it only comes in one potent 105 PS state of tune, so if you're seeking a really affordable diesel-powered Super Mini, then look elsewhere. If you're in search of a powerful blend of performance and frugality though, there's not much to touch it. For one of these, you don't pay much more than you would for a feebly performing Eco Special diesel Super Mini, and you get the same kinds of returns. Combined cycle fuel economy in the 80s, sub 90 grams per kilometre of CO2 and so on. Yet at the same time, you also get the kind of 10-second 0 to 62 mile an hour acceleration that would normally be reserved for a less efficient and much more expensive performance-orientated diesel in this class. For that £16,000 budget I mentioned earlier, it really is a very good have-your-cake-and-eat-it combination. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Mazda 2 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Mazda has been with the standard spec. Time for the detail on that. I was a little disappointed to find that base SE models have to do without a split folding rear bench, and that all variants lack a standard space-saver rear wheel, but unfortunately that sort of thing's par for the course these days in the Super Mini segment. Otherwise though, there's not much to grouse about. Entry-level trim running to daytime running lights, rear roof spoiler, electric front windows and mirrors, remote central locking, an alarm, the iStop stop-start system, and headlights that stay on at night to guide you to your front door. Inside, there's manual air conditioning, an engine stop-start button, a height-adjustable driver's seat, a trip computer, and a 4-speaker AM/FM CD stereo with USB and aux-in connectivity, plus steering wheel controls. Mazda's banking on most potential owners finding the £1,000 premium to graduate from base SE to mid-range SEL level, and most will probably be tempted in that direction. This level does, after all, entitle you to 15-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, power folding mirrors, Bluetooth connectivity for your phone, cruise control, a speed limiter, rear power windows, leather for the steering wheel and gear knob, and that 60/40 split folding rear bench I mentioned. If you're looking at the volume 1.5 litre 90 PS petrol variant, this level will also give you the desirable 7-inch colour touchscreen infotainment system, which comes with a DAB radio and can be upgraded at extra cost to include satellite navigation. That infotainment setup, Mazda calls it MZD Connect, is really very clever. As you'd want, it's compatible with iPhone and Android smartphones and can access a variety of free mobile content via AHA, a cloud-based service which features thousands of internet radio stations, personalised location-based services, and both Twitter and Facebook audio feeds. MZD Connect also supports iPod and MP3, plus SMS and text-to-speak functions. It's a very complete package that Mazda would do well to make more widely available across the range. As for the real extra cost equipment niceties, well, I've got plenty of them on this top sport model, which includes a number of features that you'll find can be specified onto lesser models from the options list. Things like larger 16-inch alloy wheels, privacy glass, auto headlamps and wipers, climate control, a better quality 6-speaker stereo, and a keyless entry and start system. This top 115 PS petrol sport variant also includes piercing LEDs for the daytime running lights and headlamps. On to safety and this car's class-leading iActive-Sense range of active safety technology features. Take the SCBS Smart City Brake Support system. At low speeds of up to 18 miles an hour, this scans the road ahead as you drive for potential collision hazards. If one is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. We've seen this sort of thing before on a few other Super Minis, but usually only as an expensive option. Here, providing you avoid the entry-level variant, it's standard, along with a lane departure warning system to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. You can also choose to pay extra for electronic safety features you simply wouldn't expect to be able to have on this class of car. For example, there's a tightly priced package that delivers 4 key features that many other Super Mini makers are still thinking about. Things like a head-up display, Mazda calls it an active driving display, that projects key driving information onto the bottom of the windscreen so that you don't have to take your eyes off the road. Then there's a high beam control system that'll automatically dip your headlights for you in the face of oncoming traffic at night. A rear cross traffic alert system that monitors your blind spots for you when you're reversing out of a space. And a blind spot monitoring setup that, on the move, stops you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car. A useful thing to have here, since the over-the-shoulder visibility in this Mazda is a little restricted. As for more conventional safety features, well, let's start with the passive stuff. All models get ISOFIX child seat fastenings, along with a pedestrian-friendly bonnet and bumper, plus twin front, side and curtain airbags. As for the basic electronic active elements, well, that tally runs to DSC dynamic stability control, a TCS traction control system and an ABS braking setup with EBA emergency brake assist for panic stops that'll be advertised to following motorists by an ESS emergency stop signalling feature that automatically flashes your hazard lights when you slam on the anchors. There's also a tyre pressure monitoring system and an HHA hill hold assist setup that stops the car from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Engine efficiency is another key area where Mazda likes to differentiate itself from its competitors. Most of these have followed a trend towards petrol engine downsizing and turbocharging, hence the 3-cylinder turbo units you now find in cars like Ford's Fiesta, Vauxhall's Corsa, Peugeot's 208 and Hyundai's i20. Mazda, in contrast, says that Super Mini engineering should actually be all about right-sizing rather than downsizing. A thinly veiled reference to the fact that for the most part, 3-cylinder turbo power plant technology is really all about getting spectacular results on the official EU economy cycle rather than giving customers the real world savings possible through economy and cleanliness you could actually realistically replicate in day-to-day motoring. If, for example, you were to ask the owner of a Fiesta 1-litre EcoBoost model, supposed to deliver over 65 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, what they actually get day in and day out, most will probably claim 50 miles to the gallon at best. That's not nearly so impressive, which is precisely the point Mazda is trying to make. That's why the Hiroshima brand wants to pursue a more honest approach that involves focusing on getting more from conventional petrol and diesel power plants rather than developing completely new ones. The company bases its development around what it calls SKYACTIV technology, a program aimed not only at improving the efficiency of engines and transmissions, but crucially also focusing on lightweight design. This vitally important aspect has seen the engineers pore over this model in intricate detail, removing unnecessary bulk wherever they could find it. As a result, the Euro 6 engines, the gearbox and the chassis are all significantly lighter than before, leading to a minimum curb weight that can be as little as 970 kilograms, enough to make this one of the very lightest contenders in its class. To give you some perspective, that figure makes this car around 85 kilograms. That's the weight of an ordinary adult, lighter than a directly comparable Fiesta or Volkswagen Polo. So, how has Mazda been able to do this when so many other brands have tried and failed to achieve meaningful weight reductions from their mainstream models? A key answer comes with the company's claim of class-leadingly high compression ratios for both SKYACTIV-G petrol and SKYACTIV-D diesel engines. The petrol unit indeed rivaling a Formula 1 car in this respect. Now that didn't mean much to me when I first read it, and it probably won't mean much to you either, so I better explain. A higher compression ratio means the engine has less in the way of mechanical stress. This allows lighter weight materials to be used in building the thing, which in turn means that the finished vehicle will need less energy to move through the air. And no energy at all, of course, when it comes to a temporary stop, say at the lights or in traffic. For at that point, in this Mazda's case, an I-stop engine stop-start system, the fastest reacting setup of its kind on the market, will cut in, reducing fuel consumption by up to 10%, all on its own. You'll be saving more energy under braking too than you would be in a comparable rival, thanks to Mazda's i-eLoop brake regeneration system. The name designates an intelligent energy loop setup that's able to harvest and then reuse significantly more energy than comparable systems. Added to that, there are slippery aerodynamics and an opportunity for the person behind the wheel to do their bit too, if they're prepared to keep an eye on the dash-mounted gear shift indicator. Models fitted with an infotainment screen also get a neat eco section as part of that display, there to give real-time feedback on driving efficiency. But enough on the technology, let's cut to the chase. What does it all mean when it comes to the bottom line? Essentially this: that a Mazda 2 will provide you with sprightlier performance than virtually all its direct rivals, yet at the same time equal or better the efficiency of almost any comparably powerful Super Mini competitor you care to name. To give you an example, the volume SKYACTIV-G 1.5 litre 90 PS petrol variant will deliver 62.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 105 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's a return getting you to within a few percentage points of a rival 1 litre turbocharged Ford Fiesta or Vauxhall Corsa, and these are noisier cars that take 2 seconds or more longer to get from rest to 62 miles an hour. Sounds promising, doesn't it? Inevitably though, when it comes to petrol-powered Mazda 2 ownership, there are a few efficiency caveats I need to acquaint you with. The first of these is quite predictable. Equip your 1.5 litre 90 PS Mazda 2 with the optional SKYACTIV Drive 6-speed automatic gearbox and your running costs will increase a little. Official figures suggest that the combined cycle fuel figure will rise to 58.9 miles to the gallon, while the CO2 reading increases to 112 grams per kilometre. That enough to put the car up another tax band. The other slightly more surprising issue relates to the entry-level 75 PS version of the same SKYACTIV-G petrol engine. This feebler unit should really have been positioned as the eco-headliner in the range, complete with silly eco-conscious badging and sub-100 grams per kilometre emissions. In fact, the opposite is true. It's actually thirstier and dirtier than the 90 PS unit, managing only 60.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 110 grams per kilometre. One to avoid, I think. At the other end of the petrol lineup, the top 115 PS 1.5 litre petrol model I'm trying here manages 56.5 miles to the gallon and emits 117 grams per kilometre, which is quite acceptable given the performance that it offers. On to diesel power. Mazda hasn't bothered providing us with a really feeble black pump fueled version of this car. In other words, an engine with the kind of 75, 80 or 90 PS output you'd get from rivals. Arguably, the company doesn't need to, given that the single, pokey 105 PS 1.5 litre SKYACTIV-D variant it does offer manages an eye-catching 83.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 89 grams per kilometre of CO2. And this, remember, is the ordinary standard model, not one with silly wheel trims, skinny tyres and green-friendly branding. Super Minis of that sort, say Ford's Fiesta TDCi Econetic, Vauxhall's Corsa CDTi Ecoflex or Skoda's Fabia TDI Greenline, are only fractionally cheaper to run, yet can take nearly 30% longer to accelerate to a meaningful speed. For me, a SKYACTIV-D diesel-powered Mazda 2 makes much more sense if you can justify its cost, and stands as a very competitive package for the right kind of buyer. Normally in these films, we hesitate to recommend Super Minis that fuel from the black pump because in real-life ownership, the savings they offer take too many miles to recoup. This one, though, could be an exception to that rule. What else? Insurance groupings are slightly higher than the norm in this segment, but are nothing to lose too much sleep over. Whether you go for the volume 1.5 litre SKYACTIV-G 90 PS petrol model or the SKYACTIV-D 1.5 litre diesel, you'll be looking at ratings of between 15 and 16E. The only variation comes if you opt for the base 75 PS petrol model, that's Group 13E, or go for this top 115 PS petrol variant, that's Group 19E. As for peace of mind, well, given the reliability of Mazda products, you'd have thought the company might have wanted to improve upon its usual 3-year, 60,000 mile package and take on the Korean brands. Not so. That familiar standard warranty remains in place for this car. Still, the cover provided does continue to include 3 years of European roadside assistance. Good things often come in little packages. Here's one of them. It's a small car that's been developed with an extraordinarily large amount of care and as a result is a class act. No other rival offers a better all-round blend of performance and efficiency. Plus, this third generation Mazda 2 delivers smart looks, reasonable pricing and an interestingly styled cabin offering premium segment features and some lovely quality touches. Is it as much fun to drive as its predecessor? No, it isn't. But with that said, I'd still suggest this to be one of the more agile and enjoyable super minis you can buy, and one that at the same time manages to be now quieter and better to ride in than it ever was before. Add to that the advantages I've already touched upon, namely that it's virtually as cheap to run as the very best of its mainstream rivals, yet is quicker off the mark than nearly all of them, and you have to conclude that Mazda's SKYACTIV technology really does seem to work. Of course, it has its limits. The entry-level 75 PS petrol version of this car is rather underwhelming. Otherwise though, it's hard to find fault, and whether you go for either of the pokier SKYACTIV-G petrol units or the impressive SKYACTIV-D diesel, it's really impossible to go too far wrong. The bottom line is that if you thought all super minis were the same, it's well worth trying one of these. Life, you might find, is full of surprises.